diver. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, Carrie. First of all, I want to thank Carrie, of course, for moderating this today, and the board, Marissa, of course, who's not here, Nanette, Jeff, Heather, and Ed. I don't know if Ed is here today, but thank you very much, guys, for organizing this, and thank you everybody for attending. I know you guys are all super busy, and this is a chunk of time, so I appreciate you making time. As far as questions today, guys, you can post any questions in the chat. I'll try to watch them, and Carrie's going to help me watch them and address them as they come up. We're also going to allow time for questions at the end of every section. No questions are not worth asking, so ask anything you'd like. Before we jump into the presentation, just a little blurb here. First of all, if people have questions about what I do, I'm happy to answer them, but I am not here to sell you guys anything today. This is all about you. So we're going to focus on that. Generally, in my business, I teach people to take care of themselves, to protect themselves and defend themselves. So throughout the presentation today, I may say things you might think that I'm somewhat reluctant to tell people to do that. Excuse me, I'm not reluctant to tell people to do that. But again, today's presentation is about how to avoid those situations. If we can avoid them, we're better off regardless. So that's what today is about. Let me go ahead and start up the presentation here so you guys can see it. Okay, there we go. So there's my cool intro picture and the logo for your organization, and then my little logo is down there in the lower right-hand corner. So why are we here, guys? We're here because you all can find yourselves in situations that can be stressful, they can be somewhat risky, and they can be difficult. Whether you are on the phone or in the facility or out in the field, there's a variety of difficult challenges you may face. So that's why we're here. You're obviously ways to deal with those things, and the fact that you guys are making time for this indicates that it is an important topic, and we will address differences in the roles, whether again you're on the phone, you're in the facility behind the front desk, for example, or you're out in the field. Before we start, though, I'd like to tell you what I hope you all get out of this, and I'm going to do it by way of a little story. The things we're talking about here are things that generally we want to practice, right? They're things that take you thinking about them, continuing to pay attention as you move through life and in your job. However, we don't have that opportunity today. Today, I'm going to introduce you to concepts. I'm going to give you a bunch of tools that you can use, but back by way of example, in 1974, so everybody knows who Muhammad Ali was, right? Heavyweight champion, had some controversy in his career. And in 1974, Ali was making a comeback in the heavyweight boxing world. He'd been out for 3.5 years, legal issues with the United States government. It's not important what it was or why. But on his return, on his comeback, he had to fight young George Foreman. And everybody knows, I think, who George Foreman is. Big George Foreman, grinning, jovial, 8 boys, all named George Foreman grill. Well, the George Foreman in 1974 is not the George Foreman you see today. He was a morose, somber, bad man, and he was knocking guys out right and left in the heavyweight division of boxing. All the big guys, Joe Frazier, Ken Norton. So Ali knew that after coming back after 3.5 years, he wasn't going to be able to fight him like he would normally. He wasn't going to be able to dance. And so he invented a new tactic. He called it the rope-a-dope. So long story short, they fought in Zaire over in Africa, and Ali leaned against the ropes, put his hands up, and he let Foreman just wail on him. And after the fight, Ali said, that man was hurting me. He was hitting harder than anybody I've ever been hit before. And I didn't know if I was going to make it. But then he said, while I was leaning against the ropes with my hands up, it occurred to me, I've been here before, and I know what to expect. So while we can't say that after today's presentation, we can't necessarily say you've been here before. Hopefully this will give you some things to harken back to, and you'll have some idea of what to expect, and that will help. So that's my hope for today's presentation, guys. Carrie, just so you know, while I'm in full screen mode like this, I am not seeing the chat. So if you do see something pop up, if you wouldn't mind, let me know. I'd appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay.
I will.
Okay, so here's the outline, guys. Here's what we're going to cover today. We're going to briefly talk about situational awareness. Situational awareness is an adjunct to de-escalation, being, paying attention to what's going on around you during or before an incident is a big help. Whether you're in a de-escalation situation or not, this will help you throughout just walking down the street. We'll talk about what de-escalation means, what the definition is, why it's needed, and when it's appropriate. And then we'll get into some very specific techniques, things you can use when you're engaged with a person who's upset or emotional or angry. And finally, we'll go through some scenarios. The scenarios are a little bit challenging in this format, and I apologize for that. It's a little better, it's a little easier when we're in person, and I can be more animated and make cool gestures and whatever. But we will do our best on the scenarios today. Okay. Okay, now typically, guys, and again, in an online format, we're going to do it a little different. Typically, I'd say, does anybody know who this is? But given how we're doing this today, I'm just going to kind of speak through some of these things. And if you do have questions, of course, put them in the chat. This is Wild Bill Hickok. I don't know if anybody remembers who he was. He died in August of 1876 in a bar in Deadwood, South Dakota. He went into that bar several times. He wanted to play cards. He never liked to sit with his back to the door, but every time he went in, the chairs that were facing the door were full, and he couldn't get anyone to change places with him. And finally, after doing this 4 or 5 times, he said, well, I want to play cards, sat down with his back to the door, and of course, some guy came in and shot him in the back. So that's one of the reasons he's famous. What could he have done different? Well, don't sit with your back to the door. Now, I'm exaggerating, this a little. I'm not suggesting that anytime you go to a restaurant, don't sit with your back to the door, but it's a good example of, an example where he had no situational awareness because he couldn't see the door. Okay. And this is obviously a Photoshop, kind of a cool picture. Since I scuba dive, I put it on here. 2 divers, and then behind them, of course, if you can't see it very well, is an image of a great white shark, and it's just a cool picture, and it just indicates lack of situational awareness. So that's why I like to put it in here. Okay. If we knew something bad was going to happen, we wouldn't be there, right? We'd be somewhere else. Maybe it's possible that de-escalation can be avoided if we're aware of what's going to happen, if we're aware that someone's upset or yelling or angry. Unfortunately, because of the nature of our jobs, we don't have the option to do what a person walking down the street might do. In other words, Mike Pivacek, I'm walking down the street. I see some people across the street and they're eyeballing me, and now they start crossing the street towards me and maybe, saying some things to challenge me. I have the option to leave. In our jobs, whether we're on the phone with an angry client, or somebody walks in the front door and they're yelling at us at the front desk, or we're out in the field and we have to go to a home to discuss a complaint, we don't really have that option. But it doesn't mean that situational awareness doesn't apply. When we're approaching that home, for example, we can pay attention to what's around, what the environment looks like. Are there other people or other animals? When someone comes in the front door, we can see them ahead of time and assess their demeanor. Are they angry? Do they look tense? Excuse me. Are they upset? On the phone, of course, this is much harder. We don't have really the ability to do much assessment with anybody on the phone until we get them on the phone and we can hear their voice. So situational awareness comes into play, even though we know that we're not going to get up and leave the front desk, or we're not necessarily going to hang up on that person, or if it's our responsibility to visit that complaint with the homeowner, we're going to go there and do our job. So it still applies, and part of it that applies is the knowledge of what happens to our bodies under stress, or in what we call a critical incident. These things happen to our body, whether it's a face-to-face encounter, it could be on the phone, anything that has the potential to make us stressed, to give us angst or cause us nervousness, our body will respond in ways that we can't control. Being aware of those can help us mitigate that a bit. So here are things that will happen to our bodies under stress. So adrenaline gets dumped into our system. That increases our heart rate. Our blood pressure goes up. Our bronchial passages dilate so we can breathe a little easier and a little more. And we dump glucose into our bloodstream. The reason those things happen is our body is preparing for a response, whether it's fight or flight. In fact, it's really three things. It's fight, flight, or freeze, one of the three. But this is our body preparing to do something to save ourselves, whether it's run or fight. During the incident, what will happen is we'll experience something called tachypsychia. Tachypsychia is a neurological condition that causes different perceptions of time. People report seeing punches coming towards their face. Everything seems to slow down, just like, you're in the Matrix or something, right? So it's a very interesting phenomenon. It can be caused by physical exertion or stress, or it could be caused by drugs. The other thing that will occur is blood rushes to your core. So a couple reasons for that. Number one, to protect your core organs, make sure they get the blood flow that they need so that you can fight or run. And secondly, to ensure that if you get injured on the periphery, in your arm or in your leg, your body's trying to mitigate blood, bleeding out from those extremity injuries, if you will. A result of that blood rushing to your core is you lose your fine motor skills. Your fine motor skills are really the first thing to go under stress. So, your hands are shaking, your voice may be shaking. If you try to, dial a cell phone or open a lock or, operate a different type of lock, that will be very difficult under stress because those fine motor skills are gone. So again, be aware, you're somebody comes into the front door and they're yelling and they're angry and you're trying to call for help, your fine motor skills may be compromised and it might be harder for you to do that kind of stuff. Auditory exclusion is one that happens under very volatile situations. It's probably not likely that we'll experience that, but literally your hearing turns off certain sounds to protect your hearing. So there's documented examples of law enforcement officers in gunfights. And after the gunfight, they say, well, I thought that I should shoot back. I thought I should engage the bad guy, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. And meanwhile, they're standing in a pile of brass, right? They just didn't hear those gunshots. So that's not an uncommon behavior in a very highly volatile situation. Finally, tunnel vision, and you may experience this. And this can happen whether it's with another person, it's a car accident, it's you're witnessing something, whatever. And unlike the name implies, tunnel vision does not mean that your peripheral vision is less effective. What really happens is the cone cells, the cells in the center of your eyes, you're starving for information. You're focusing on what's in front of you. Blood rushes to those cone cells, and it gives the appearance that your peripheral vision is less effective, but it's really not. And there are tools we use, when we do this kind of training in more detail, tools we use to break that tunnel vision. But these are all things, guys, that will happen to you under stress in many cases as you're preparing for fight or flight. So there was this guy, his name was Colonel Jeff Cooper. Colonel Cooper was a Marine Corps officer. He was a writer. He was a self-defense trainer, really good guy, smart guy, had a facility down in Arizona. And he created this model called Colonel Cooper's Color Code of Awareness. Try to say that 5 times fast. So Colonel Cooper postulated that there were 4 levels of awareness. Condition white. So I'm in my house, my feet are up, the dog's at my feet, TV's on, door's locked. I'm completely oblivious to the world. Now, Colonel Cooper also said, as you see on here, that there are people who are out in the world walking around in condition white. He said, of course, that's a no-no. You don't want to do that. What you really want to do, and his mantra was stay in condition yellow, which is the next level. So you're relaxed, you're alert, you're aware of your surroundings. I'm paying attention. I'm seeing what's going on. If I'm in a restaurant or a movie theater, I might be aware of where the exits are, but no particular threat, nothing that's really got me nervous, but I'm paying attention. My head's up. Condition orange, now I see these guys across the street, and they're eyeballing me, and there's 3 or 4 of them, and they're watching me closely, and it just feels weird. Or maybe, as in the example here, somebody's wearing a ski jacket in July. That makes me nervous. So now I've got something that is a potential threat, and I'm paying more attention. It doesn't feel right, but I'm kind of focused, surreptitiously on what that is, what those people are. And then condition red is now it's on, right? So this group of guys is crossing the street. They're yelling at me. What are you doing in our neighborhood? What are you looking at? And now there's a real potential, and I have to be concerned. And now I have to decide, am I going to run, fight or flight, or they have hide in here, but that's generally on the street. That's tough to do. So it's fight or flight. Unfortunately, many people, untrained people, do the third one, which is freeze, and freeze is not a good thing. So part of the reason we pay attention to this is so we don't become those people who freeze. But that was Colonel Cooper, great guy, good writer. Here's the trick to the whole thing, though, guys. We can't stay situationally aware 100% of the time. I don't care how good you are at it. When I do executive protection work, it is hours and hours and hours of sheer boredom, sometimes, populated with little heart-cracking bits of excitement. But you have to stay switched on that whole time. It's unbelievably hard to do. And so for those of us who are out with our family walking down the street, we're paying attention to the people with us. When I'm in a restaurant, I don't have a clear menu where I can, scan the restaurant while I'm looking for what to order. If I'm in a restaurant with Carrie and we're talking, I'm looking at her while we talk. I'm not really scanning the restaurant. So life distracts us. You go to a gas station and you're pumping gas, and someone comes up, approaches you from the front, says, "Hey, can you tell me what time it is?" And when you look, their buddy walks up behind you and cracks you in the head. So normal life things will distract us, whether they're contrived or not. By definition, when these things happen, it's probably going to be a surprise, because again, if we knew it was going to happen, we wouldn't be there. Of course, what we're talking about here is the fact that we have to be there, right? So we see somebody walking in the front door, they look angry, they look upset. We're at the front desk. We probably don't have the option to just get up and walk away necessarily. Again, on the phone, somebody's yelling at you, somebody's angry. Could you hang up on them? You could, probably not the best choice. And again, out in the field, it's even tougher when you're approaching a home. But we want to do our best to foresee risky situations and try to mitigate them if we can. Again, watch the person walking in the door, look at their demeanor. Approaching the home, there are some techniques we talk about there in a little bit. And again, on the phone, every phone call is going to be a surprise because you just don't know ahead of time. Okay. Here's some huge and real situational awareness fails. So Northwest flight crew, they were flying to Minneapolis, and they blew right past Minneapolis. And once they were in central Wisconsin, they realized that they had overshot their target. I mean, holy cow, how do you do that? A very sad one, a young girl, teenage girl in Florida, crossing some railroad tracks, had her headset on, had her cell phone in front of her, never saw or heard the train that was, roaring down the tracks that killed her. Personal experience, I was in a trade show in San Francisco not too long ago, and literally it was attended by 100,000 people. And of those 100,000, I'm making this number up, but of those 100,000, I estimate 80,000 of them were walking around with their face in their phone and their headphones on, and it looks something like this, but much more densely populated, obviously. In that situation, if something goes wrong, it's just going to be a real soup sandwich, if you will. So what we do when we talk about situational awareness, and this is kind of the wrap up on this part of it, is scenario-based training helps, so we can practice our stimulus response. We can visualize events as we move through life. So, whether we're approaching a house, and it's good to exercise this ability, even if it's not job related. My brother-in-law is a police officer for the Frederick Police Department. When his wife and he and my wife and I go out to dinner, whenever we sit down at a table, it's like, the Three Stooges musical chairs to see who gets to sit facing the door between he and I. And it drives our wives crazy, of course. But we do that because we do try to visualize those events as we move through life, and we try to visualize what our responses would be. So it's an ongoing exercise. It's something you can practice and do. I recommend you think about it. Just be more aware. Walk with your head up and not, down like this. And last but not least, guys, trust your instincts. There's a book I recommend. And Carrie, I think you and Marissa both have the information, but it's called The Gift of Fear. It's by a guy named Gavin DeBecker, Debecker. It's an older book, but it's a really good book. And DeBecker's, what the book is about is if you feel the hair on the back of your neck stand up and you think something's wrong, something is probably wrong. Those instincts have been bred into us for millions of years. And not to sound sexist, because it's actually the opposite, but women are much better at this than men. As men, we tend to poo-poo those feelings, which is stupid because we should pay heed to them, and we don't. So DeBecker's, book is all about paying attention to those instincts, reacting appropriately. He talks about people who literally, true stories, went to the airport, 9/11, we're going to get on, flight 93 or whatever the flight 10, whatever the other flights were. They got to the airport and said, I'm not getting on the plane today. To this day, they don't know why, but they had that feeling. They trusted that feeling. And obviously that was worked out for them, unfortunately not for others. So scenario-based training, enough said about thinking ahead, paying attention, guys, right? Situational awareness. So here's my cool little intro to de-escalation picture. What does de-escalation mean? So they're things that we do, right? Not the other person we're engaged with. They're things that we're going to do, whether it's the way we talk, our body language, what we do, but it's a bunch of techniques that we use to either avoid having a situation escalate into potentially violence, or to try to reduce the intensity of a situation that's already approaching that point. So this is stuff that we own, not necessarily the other person who we're engaged with. What we try to do, and again, I'm going to use this word, I may overuse it throughout the presentation today, is we try to be empathetic. Like I said, I teach people to defend themselves. I teach people to fight. And that seems counter to empathy, but the truth is, if we can avoid it, we want to avoid it. Okay. We want people to feel like they're being heard, right? We want to make them feel like they're being heard. We want to demonstrate to them that we understand what they're saying. We may not agree, but we want them to feel like we're listening, we're paying attention, and there can at least be some basis for a discussion. Okay. And the best thing to do here is be proactive, right? When we first start talking to a person, if they show any signs of escalation, any signs of anger, we should start right away. Even if they don't, we should start right away. We should try to avoid having this happen. So when we have a conversation with them, we'll talk about active listening in just a minute here, but pay attention. Let them know that they have a forum to talk with you, and it's not just you coming there and being directive. Okay. We want to look for common ground. There's another book I'm going to talk about. It's called Getting to Yes. It's also an older book. It's by Fisher and Ury, U-R-Y, two people. It's an older book, but it's reprinted often. It's still in print. And it talks about how to get to a common ground without negotiating over positions. So it's a good book. It's a short book. It's good to read. And if you're a person who negotiates, which frankly we all do every day of the week, all day long, it's a good thing to pay attention to. Now, all of that implies something. It implies that the person you're engaged with, the person you're dealing with, is rational, right? And they're willing to listen. They're willing to pay attention. They're willing to internalize what you're saying to them. Well, we know that may not necessarily be the case, right? They could be completely upset and angry. They're talking, they're not listening. They're potentially in your face. They're, yelling or crying. So if a person's not rational, it's really, really difficult, right? It's going to be hard to engage them with a a logical conversation if they're not at a rational point. And they are not always that way. So there are situations again, I'll talk about this a little later, where a more authoritarian approach might be required. We don't want to start there, but look, at the end of the day, it's our job, and it could be the person on the phone, at the desk, or in the field. More likely, we'll see this in the field. But if you're on the phone with someone and they're yelling and they're mistreating you, you may have to be more firm and say, look, please stop that. We can't have a conversation. You may have to be more authoritarian, whether it's in person or remote. Really what it comes down to, guys, is what are the obligations of your role? So what are the policies and procedures of your organizations? If you're going to a place to issue a citation for, a dog running loose, if the person is argumentative, what is your obligation then? Do you press forward and issue the ticket or the summons or whatever it is? Or if it becomes really difficult, you say, you know what, I'm going to walk away, and we'll come back and deal with it differently. So obviously knowing what your obligations are, walking away if need to, and coming back with additional help should it be required. Okay. So when we talk about de-escalation, this is the stuff we're dealing with. In the self-defense world, we always talk about the best fight is when you can avoid or escape. As skilled as someone may be, no one wins in a fight. You beat somebody up, you hurt them, legal issues come about. There's usually no reason to do it except for a risky, threatening self-defense situation. But in the kind of stuff we're talking about, in general, we want to avoid that. We want to not have damage to anybody involved. If we have the opportunity to walk away, if we have the opportunity to come back later when the person calms down, that's not a bad choice. But again, it depends on what our official obligations are. If you are, for example, a police officer and you approach someone who's doing damage to property or another person, you can't simply walk away and say, well, I'll come back later. You might call for backup, but you can't just walk away. So we have to know what our responsibilities are, both in terms of our organization and us personally. As far as trying to not fight, trying to not escalate the situation, it's really the right thing to do. We had an example yesterday where one of the people talked about they showed up and they got a call, they showed up, the report was kind of unfortunately a lot of excessive feces around this person's house. Showed up, the lady came out of the house and was yelling and crying, and the responding officer did the right thing. She let this person talk and vent. And after a couple minutes, the person stopped and said, I'm really sorry. I'm going through a divorce. I have to move. I don't know what to do with my animals. So, we often find out that there are things in people's lives that are contributing to their stress. So, it's always better to try to give them the benefit of the doubt if we can. It's better for them. It's better for us. Okay. I'm going to ask in a second here of who may have some experience or some examples, but I'll give you one first. I was in Mexico last year, and I was with a group of clients, and we were coming back to the hotel. We got off of a van. We were standing outside the hotel getting ready to go in. I had 30 pounds of wet dive stuff over my shoulder, and 3 guys and 2 girls were walking down the street in front of the hotel. And one of the guys starts yelling at the top of his lungs. Well, what do? You look, right? You just look. It's a natural reaction. When I looked, he noticed, and he looked at me, locked eyes with me, and started, what are you looking at? You got a problem with me? Do you want to go? I'll come over there right now. And it was going from 0 to 60. And I had the presence of mind to think, boy, I should drop this dive bag in case something happens. But then I realized if I do that, that's going to be a signal to him that I'm escalating and we're going to go. So instead, and to this day, I don't know how this flashed through my mind, I looked at him and I said, oh, dude, that shirt you're wearing is really cool. It's some bright colored shirt. I don't know what it was. I said, that's really a cool shirt. It caught my eye. Where did you get that? And he looked at me, completely nonplussed for about 10 seconds. And he said, oh, I got into this shop down the street here, about a mile down. There's a sign outside, blah, blah, blah. And I said, thanks. And they continued on their way. Was, a few years back, that wouldn't have been as gratifying to me as, getting engaged with him. But you know what? Who knows who could have gone to jail? Who could have been hurt over what? It's completely nothing. So that's a situation that happened with me. And like I said, to this day, I don't know why it flashed through my head to bring up his shirt. But let me pause there. And if anybody has one that they'd like to share, we can put it in the chat. Or if you like, you're also welcome to unmute yourself and, bring it up, talk about it. Anybody have one they'd like to share? Gary, I'm not seeing the chat. Are you seeing? Has anybody got anything? Here we go. I see it now.
I don't see any chat comments.
Okay. I will give it a minute, guys. And look, if you're not comfortable with it, I get it. But think through this in your mind, right? Think through situations you've encountered and what you did and how they turned out. And let's see if they map in with some of the stuff we're about to talk about here as far as how to respond. Okay. Okay, here we go. Okay, when is de-escalation appropriate? Well, in a lot of situations, right? It can be something as simple as an argument with a server in a restaurant over your food, or a classic one is driving down the road, right? Road rage scenarios, which nobody ever wins. There's no point in it. But any situation where tension is high, when it's high or it's escalating, okay? Anything like that could be problematic, particularly when people are in a crisis situation or they think they're in a crisis situation. What's important here is their perception of where they are right now is key. So you may look at it and say, it's not a crisis. I'm coming to talk to you about a noise complaint, and they may be dealing with, again, maybe a divorce or having to move or whatever. So it's important, again, to try to get inside that person, get them to talk a little bit. Generally, when people talk, they will tell you something about themselves and their situation. Okay. So it's how they perceive the situation. You remember, you might be on their property and that might be a challenge to them. Maybe you're challenging their concerns or their feelings in an emotional state. Look, guys, I have 3 dogs, and I can promise you that if something were to go awry, someone were to show up at my house saying, hey, we've had a complaint about your dog, we're going to take it, we think it bit someone, blah, blah. I'm going to be pretty excited, and there's going to be a tricky conversation. So remember that the people we're dealing with here may not be listening, or even if they're listening, they're not comprehending. And also,
Mike.
Yes, go ahead,
Oh,
Carrie.
I'm sorry. There is one person that shared a story.
Oh, awesome. Let me pull it up.
Chat.
Okay, cool. Let me pull it up. Okay, I can share a story from a few years back. I helped a woman who was having a breakdown, locked herself in our public restroom right at closing, removed her clothing, did not want to come out. The paramedics were already there. We're all men. Went in, sat on the floor, spoke with her, explaining how they could help and how we'd be able to keep her safe, her animal safe at the shelter. Boy, this is an outstanding one. This is from Carolyn, guys. This is an outstanding one, Carolyn, because what you did was make that person feel like they were being heard. You sat down, you empathized with her, you made her feel like she had a friend. My guess is that after that, and you can put in the chat here if it's true, my guess is she listened to you, she calmed down a little bit, maybe put her clothes on and got up, and you ended the situation. But this is a perfect example, right? You could have banged on the door and said, come out, or we're kicking the door in, or, get out here right now. Instead, You went in and sat down and made that person feel like they were being heard. So this is a great example. And Carolyn, maybe if you would, if you don't mind, go ahead and put in the chat. My guess is it ended rather uneventfully, if that's fair to say. We'll move on, but if you don't mind, Carolyn, we'd love to hear how that story ended. My guess, based on what you did here, which was spot on, is that it ended well. So, okay. We also have to remember, guys, that the circumstances are going to change, right? You may show up and everybody's perfectly calm, and it can escalate. It can get out of control. You may show up and it's already escalated, and by what you do, maybe you calm the situation down. Pardon me. So it's going to change. It's a continuum. Just because you show up and everybody's calm, it doesn't mean it's going to stay that way, and vice versa. Our key here is to not introduce more stress. Stress is the enemy of getting people calm. And so we really want to not cause them to feel more stressed. Again, Carolyn's story is a great one. Rather than telling this woman that, by God, get your clothes on, get the heck out of here, instead, she lowered her level of stress by showing her that she had someone who was a friend, could pay attention. Emotion clouds our judgment. It clouds our ability to think rationally. And again, you guys know this better than I do. When we're talking about, animals, pets or work animals or whatever, there can be a lot of emotion involved. In fact, I was down visiting the facility last year, and I walked through that area where the dogs were, and I promised myself I'd never do that again because, oh my gosh, just seeing that is tough, right? So, understand, you have to be listening, you have to be paying attention, and more than that, they have to know that you're listening and paying attention. Okay. Okay. You may have to take charge. When you're taking charge, you don't necessarily have to do it aggressively. Again, there's a time and a place for that, and it may come to that, but you can kind of do it in a calm, more relaxed manner. You can take charge through some of the techniques we're going to talk about in a moment. When emotions are high and when things are escalating, it's difficult to stop. And sometimes, they feed off of each other. Sometimes the person who's instigating it intends for it to become emotional and to escalate. A great example of this, one of the examples we use are, the First Amendment auditors, right? People who show up at your facility with a camera. And I'm not saying that they all have this intention, but look, a lot of the time, what these folks are showing up for is to try to get a reaction out of you, right? Get off of our property, get that camera out of here. A lot of times that's what some of these people are after. So it's sometimes hard to stop. It's often beyond the proportion of the issue at hand. We had one yesterday. Josh brought up an example. He was going to talk to a family about a noise complaint. And a guy came charging out the front door, came right towards him. Josh thought it was going to turn into a physical confrontation over a noise complaint ticket, right? So again, sometimes people's rational thought is not present in these situations. When we're talking about de-escalation, guys, it is a continuum. It can be everything from de-escalating over this noise complaint ticket to de-escalating over someone who is like physically threatening you, and it is potentially a life-threatening situation. So these techniques can work along that continuum, although obviously it's much harder if it's life-threatening. Okay. The vast majority, guys, of communication, the things that we derive or we learn about people are more from body language than what they say. People can say one thing and their body language tells us another. So the things, the sort of physical components that tell us what a person's really thinking or feeling are their voice and their gestures, right? We can evaluate someone's level of tension or stress or anger based on their nonverbal communication. Typically, sometimes the most dangerous person, however, is a person who appears very calm and very controlled. but generally most people don't do that. Most people are going to give you a clue what's going on with their voice, the tone. Are they talking in a normal conversational voice? Is the tone of their voice, is it going down? How's their volume? Is it high? Are they yelling? Are they being very quiet? Is their voice shaky, which tells you that they're on edge? So voice and language obviously have a lot to do with it. And hand gestures, right? Pointing at you, right? Giving you this hand, gesturing vigorously. All of those things will give you a sense for how a person's, what they're thinking and where they're going. If they walk up to the front desk and they're perfectly calm and they have a conversational voice, it's probably not something you need to worry about. And here's some examples, right? So this fellow in the upper right-hand corner, this looks to me like a pretty aggressive stare. Looks like he's angry. Looks like he's trying to convey something that I don't want a part of necessarily. The lady in the lower right-hand corner with her hands on her hips, this does not appear to be someone who's willing to have an open conversation. She's probably not really listening. And then the lady next to her, squinting, pursed lips, she just has that angry look. Clearly, she is upset about something. So things like squinting, the face is red, clenched jaw, those are all obviously signs that someone is angry and probably not ready to listen, at least right away. The good thing about body language stuff like this is it works for us in two of the situations we're talking about. So in the field, obviously, you can see the person, you can recognize their body language and what they're portraying. If someone's walking in the front door of the facility, again, a little bit of that situational awareness. You see them coming in, they're obviously angry, they're tense, their face is clenched up, right? And you can just tell that they're angry. We can be a little more proactive there. You see someone walk in the door like that and, hey, good morning, sir. How are you? Boy, it's beautiful out, but it's going to snow like heck, right? What can I do for you today? Anything you can do, guys, to preempt that anger or to try to get them to calm down a little bit is better. And even on the phone, while we can't see the body language, we can hear the voice, we can hear the tone, we can hear the volume, we can hear if they're calm. So these are key things for us to understand before the situation escalates, what that person's state of mind is.
Mike,
Yes, go ahead, Carrie.
I'm sorry. So there was a question, has some of this changed with people wearing masks and removing some of those visual clues?
Excellent. So first, let me jump back here really quick. I see Carolyn posted her response. The individual left with the paramedics and the police. Good job, Carolyn, because nonetheless, it doesn't sound like anybody got hurt, which is the key. Masks, 100%, right? How many of us, I had this happen just the other day, how many of us walk into a place and someone we know is in there, a friend of ours, and we don't recognize them, right? It happens, and it is harder, right? We can't see their mouths. We can see their eyes. We can see their bodies, but a big part of their face is covered up. It's definitely harder. So no doubt about it, we may have to pay more attention to the other things we can see. Again, what their eyes look like, how their body is it tensed up. You can see if somebody's brow is furrowed, right, in their voice. So it's definitely tougher. Okay, so this is one of my picture I really get a kick out of. So for those of you that don't know, the fellow on the right is Lyndon Johnson. Lyndon Johnson was the president of the United States from 1964 to 68, I think. He became president when JFK was shot because he was the VP. And this is what people called the Johnson treatment. Johnson was a big guy. He was like 6'4", and when he wanted to influence someone to do something, he'd lean in and get in their space. The Johnson treatment. So here's a case of someone, using their body language to kind of get what they want. Things to pay attention to also are what people say. What are you looking at? The guy on the street in Mexico, right? This is my property. These are my animals. You're here to help. You're from the government. What a joke, right? So what they say is important. How they say it is equally important. Okay. A phenomenon we refer to in the self-defense world, and it's less applicable here. It's not applicable on the phone, slightly applicable in the building, but certainly in the field. We call it the monkey dance. And the classic monkey dance, two young guys, testosterone, maybe alcohol involved, right? What are you looking at? What are you looking at? Getting face to face, chest puffed out, leaning in like this, obviously upset, and it's a precursor to violence typically. Could be somebody poking somebody in the chest. So this is something that you could see in the field. Again, Josh, the example Josh used yesterday, the guy rushing out the front door, getting in his face, and it is often a precursor to violence. Backing down from this, getting someone to back down from this is tough. Generally when this occurs, and this is where the guy in Mexico was headed with me, generally where it occurs is there are other people there and there's an ego thing involved. Getting someone to back down or de-escalating someone from this is tough. And this could be a situation where it's, it's possible that maybe the answer is to just step back. And if your responsibility is no one's life is in jeopardy and your organizational policies allow for it, take a step back, take a breath, let the person calm down. Again, this is only applicable really out in the field, not in the facility so much, certainly not on the phone, but it's important to recognize because when somebody's in this state, getting them to de-escalate is tough. The thing in Mexico, like I said, this is where it was going. He was headed this direction, and somehow the whole shirt thing, which just popped into my head, caught him completely off guard. So that's something we think about more in the self-defense world. And here's my cool picture of baboons or monkeys. So what we're going to do, guys, that's the first segment. Okay, we're going to pause here. I'm going to look at the chat, and Carrie and I will both watch the chat, and we're going to pause and give a little time for questions about any of that. I know I'm going through this somewhat speedily. Any questions whatsoever, or if you'd like, you can unmute yourself, and then when Carrie thinks it's appropriate, we'll pause that and go take a quick break. All right, Carrie, I guess we're doing a completely outstanding job.
That's right.
Guys, I know it's tough, right? This platform is tough. And we will have time at the end for questions, and we'll field questions long after the presentation as well.
And I just wanted to mention the links to the books that were referenced by Mike are in the group chat. So if anybody's interested in those. And I guess we'll take a 5-minute break and we'll start back up at about 1:56.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, guys. We'll be back in a couple minutes.
Mike, I think whenever you're ready to start again, we should be good.
Okay, cool. So before we jump in again, guys, let me just a note. So these slides are available. Carrie has them. Heather, Jeff, I think you guys have them. Ed probably, and Marissa. So these are available to you after the fact. And therefore, if you do have any questions that you think of or any comments or scenarios you'd like to talk through, feel free to reach out with questions anytime. I'm happy to have those conversations. So let's talk about different roles, guys. The three specific roles that we've kind of tried to tailor this presentation around are phone support in the facility and in the field. Obviously, those roles are very different. And when I say here they have strengths and weaknesses, I'm talking about the roles themselves, not the people. By the way, Carrie, I've reconfigured my screen so I can see the chat. So technical user error, but I can see it now.
Okay.
So yeah, guys, so the roles obviously carry different strengths and weaknesses. It has nothing to do with the people. And in any case, whether it's the phone or in person, either at the desk in the facility or out in the field, cultural or language or speech challenges can come to play. I used to work for a guy, his name was Mahendra. Mahendra was the best guy in the world, wonderful guy to work for, just a wonderful human being, but he talked 400 miles an hour. And learning to understand him in person took a little while, and on the phone it was really tough. So we can't underestimate some of the challenges we might experience just with people's different backgrounds and different languages. So keep that in mind. So again, we'll talk about the different roles and the different strengths and weaknesses. So let's start off with the phone. In some ways, guys, they're all challenging. This one can be extremely challenging. Everything is a surprise, right? Somebody picks up the phone and calls you. You have no forewarning what they're going to look like, what they're going to be upset about. Strengths, you can disconnect, right? There is an electronic barrier between you and the other person. And if they become abusive, you can disconnect the phone. Again, that's probably not the best choice, because really in that case, what you're doing is you're making them more angry. You hung up on me? Really? So it's probably not really an option, but you also have the option, without letting the person that you're talking to know, without it being obvious, to signal for help, right? Wave your hand, get a supervisor over, get a manager on the phone with them, and you to try to manage the situation. So there are some real strengths in the phone support role. Weaknesses, it's more difficult to establish a rapport. Right? I can't look somebody in the face. They can't see the expression on my face. I might say something and I'm being sincere, but maybe it doesn't sound sincere on the phone. They just don't know, right? It's harder to convey empathy, and it's impossible for me, really, other than their voice, to gauge their mood. I can't see their body language. Now, voice is a really good indicator, so typically that helps, but we don't have the advantage of all those other things we can do in person. And again, these calls are not pre-planned, right? Somebody calls, you pick up the phone. Hello, I'm making this up. Denver Dumb Friends League. This is Mike. How may I help you? You have no idea what that person's calling about, how happy or sad they are, and what they're going to ask you. So in a lot of ways, the phone support role, you have to be more agile and more thinking on your feet. So there's obviously pros and cons to all of these. At the facility. So here I am at the front desk. Someone walks in the front door. Now I'm face to face. I can gauge their mood. I can tell their body language. I can see what they're portraying to me with that body language. It's a little easier for me to establish a rapport. I can look them in the eyes, right? I can, really, I can put my hands in such a way that I'm showing them I'm interested, or I can lean into their conversation to show that I'm paying attention. Um, we also have the ability to quickly request assistance. So if I'm in the facility, there's other people around. If I have to, I can, pardon me, sir, let me get someone else to come over and talk to you. I could signal someone to come over. I could get a manager, whatever needs to happen. I've got some backup somewhere in the facility that I could rely on if I needed to. Perhaps I don't remember, I was in the facility in Denver a while back. There were not designated security people in the front. So that's probably not an option, but there are other people at hand who could help. And there's a little bit of a barrier, right? There's the desks there, there's the countertop. And, if someone appears like they're about to get violent, there's something in the way. So you got a little bit of a barrier, not that electronic barrier like on the phone. Um, Weaknesses, well, obviously you're more directly exposed, right? If someone comes in and they're angry and dangerous, you're right there. You're right in front of them. And generally the person behind the desk, you're seen as the representative of the organization, and they could just believe that you're the adversary, right? Forget that it's a larger organizational issue or a policy issue. You're the person, and by God, you're responsible, and you're going to solve my problem. These visits, like phone visits, can also be unplanned. So someone walks in the front door, you have no idea why they're there, what they're thinking about, what their concerns are, but you do have the advantage of being able to see them, visually gauge their body language and their mood. So in the facility, some advantages and disadvantages there. Obviously, at somebody's home, in the field, we'll call it in general. So again, face to face, you can gauge their mood, you can pick up on their body language, and again, you can establish a rapport. You can look them in the eye and really engage with them on a personal level. You also have the ability to look at the environment before you approach the home, right? You can look around and see where the outbuildings are or where the animals are, and you can make an assessment. Does this look like it's a well-maintained residence? Is there pride of ownership? Is it likely that someone really will be concerned about making sure we solve this problem? Or unfortunately, like that place in Weld County that you guys might have seen about probably 3-4 weeks ago now, maybe longer, animal control went to the person's home, and there was a big pen, and in the pen were dead and live animals all in one pen. I think there was questions whether or not there was food and water. So you drive up to to a place and you see that, and that tells you a little something about maybe what you should be prepared for. So then you have the ability to plan your approach. You can learn about the people. You will know, have they had previous complaints? What was the experience the responding officer had? Were they cooperative? Were they uncooperative? Were they violent? So you can get some background, which we don't have the advantage to do when we're on the phone or in the facility. Weaknesses, again, you're directly exposed here. You're on their turf, if you will. So you're exposed to the danger, you're exposed to their anger, you're exposed to probably their proprietary, you're on my property, you're on my land, these are my animals, get off, right? And the only backup you have available is whoever's with you. If you're by yourself, you have no backup. You're on your own. If you have one other person, then so be it. But you have what you have. You can't really just easily signal someone to come over and help you. And again, you can be seen as an intruder. You're on my property, get off my property. This is private. You don't belong here. If you don't get off, something bad's going to happen. So it can very quickly devolve into that kind of situation. So again, if you're on the phone, you don't really have the ability to do much pre-observation. You can listen to their voice. If you're in the facility, you can see them as they walk in. If you're in the field, you can view them. Also, guys, whether it's somebody walking into the facility or you're at their home, you want to unobtrusively scan the environment. And what I mean by unobtrusively is, you're at the front door and you want to know if there's somebody coming up behind you, or they're in front of you talking and you want to pay attention to someone else coming in the front door. So you want to not make it obvious to the person you're talking to that, you're doing this, looking behind you, but you can do something like, let me open my notebook. Excuse me just a second. I want to take notes. By the way, that's a really cool outbuilding you have over there. I see that. And I notice your neighbors have this little, this path over here. That's very cool. You can do things to allow yourself the ability to observe without making it obvious. But you want to do that because, again, it comes to that situational awareness, knowing what's around you. Okay. So mindset. When we talk about mindset, guys, we're talking about our mindset, hearkening back to what I said earlier, not theirs, because we're not going to change that. We can try to influence it. We can try to improve it, but we can't really know 100% what's in their mind, but we know what's in our mind, right? So we want to stay patient and stay polite as much as we can. Stay professional, okay? It's hard sometimes staying calm. Somebody's calling you names. They could be very, it could be very personal. They could be insulting you personally. And it's tough to stay calm in the face of that, but we really have to try, because if we escalate, they escalate, the situation quickly gets out of control. So again, I talked about this earlier. Listen, pay attention, listen actively, listen to their complaint, listen to what they have to say, and try your best to see the humanity in that other person. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's impossible. There are people who you just can't, try as you might, you can't sympathize with them because they're nasty, they're rude, and they could in fact be threatening to you. So pay attention to the environment and the individual. On the phone, again, this doesn't apply. So keep a safe distance, right? Even in the facility, if someone tries to come around the counter and talk to you, for example, you want to keep a safe distance. In the field, clearly, you want to maintain that distance. You walk up to a front door and there are some concrete steps up to the front door. You knock on the door, walk back down the steps, right? Greet the person from down on the steps so that you're not right up on the door. And again, scan for threats. So not only around you, but look at the person. And again, do it, don't be doing this, right? But, unobtrusively look, people carry their tools on their belt. So look at their hands, look around their waist. What do you see there? Make sure there's nothing that poses a risk to you. And at the end of the day, guys, again, your policies, your procedures dictate, but I will tell you that if you feel you're at risk, life is not in jeopardy here, disengage, right? Disengage, walk away, go get help if you think it's appropriate, but there's no reason to press a bad position, especially if you're by yourself, okay? So mindset, and then we also want to know ourselves. So we talk a lot about breathing. So in the justice here, in the quote tactical world, when we're entering a building, we're entering a structure, we line up in a group. We call it a stack. You have your arm on the shoulder of the person in front of you. And when we're preparing to enter, the first thing we do is we stop and we start breathing. We take some breaths. We call it tactical breathing or combat breathing because it sounds cool. But it's really the same thing. It's that Zen-like deep inhalation, slow exhalation. And this will calm anybody down. In scuba diving, we learn that if we're on the verge of panic and we do this, it will help us avoid panic. So if you feel yourself escalating, if you feel the stress getting into your body, if you feel like you're approaching the edge, stop, take a breath. Before you approach the home, you're sitting in your vehicle, take some breaths, calm yourself down. When you're on the phone, someone's yelling at you, they're being rude and nasty, you can stop, take a breath. When someone's at the front desk, you could do the same thing, but you don't want them to think that you're pausing and not paying attention to them. So, excuse me, ma'am, let me get logged onto my computer so I can start taking notes because I really want to capture what you're telling me. So you're logging onto the computer and you're taking a breath, okay? So it's really important, guys, that you know yourself as well as you possibly can. Know what your presence is. In law enforcement, we talk about command presence, which is, really taking charge. And that's a good thing to have. But again, in this situation, we probably don't want to be appear overly aggressive. We want to be open. We want to be receptive, but we also don't want to appear to be timid, right? We don't want to approach like this. We want to be strong. We want to be confident. You know, we've all known people who you see them walking down the street and they look timid, they look scared. We see people walking down the street that have that swagger, that look like they're very aggressive, when in fact, the person who I would least like to have an encounter with is the person who doesn't look aggressive, the person who doesn't look timid, but the person who appears calm and self-confident. And that's what we want to appear as, calm and self-confident. Our facial expressions will play into it a lot. Again, in the self-defense world, we use an expression, we call it our war face. We don't want to have war faces here. So a war face is intended to convey aggression and to instill fear into someone who you know you're going to have to engage with. We don't want that here. So you can practice your facial expressions in the mirror. I tell my self-defense guys, practice your war face in the mirror. Sounds a little weird, but again, practice that neutral expression and practice your voice. You know, you can record it again. That sounds a little weird, but you can practice it with somebody else, right? Get on the phone with someone. You don't have to be in person. Talk through situations and just practice maintaining that calm, smooth demeanor. A key thing, which is often important, is talk less, right? Let the other person talk. And again, some of the examples we had yesterday, you know, it was people just, you know, being present, letting the person talk, letting them vent, letting them calm themselves down, right? The example Carolyn used earlier, she went and sat down next to the person, and that person, you know, sounds like they ultimately got up and they left with the police and the paramedics. So sometimes just letting them talk, letting them get it out is huge. Be polite, show understanding, don't be meek, don't be timid, but try to relate to them, right? You know, I have a dog just like yours, or I used to have a dog just like yours, or, you know, boy, you know, I had a neighbor too who I always had issues with, and here's some things I did to try to resolve that. So show understanding, try to repeat back what they're saying to you, and give them some, you know, some actual feedback. Okay. This is just a funny picture, different facial expressions, obviously, and you can tell, you know, you can look at it and say, well, here they're obviously angry, here they're confused, here they're, you know, questioning. So, you know, again, practicing your facial expressions. So, know yourself and know your world. So direct eye contact is great. Now, I don't mean eyeballing someone. Walking down the street, if I'm walking down the street downtown and there's somebody walking towards me and I'm eyeballing them, that can be seen as a challenge and it can initiate a problem. But when you're talking to someone, you can look them in the eye and you can, you know, demonstrate empathy just with your eyes. And to Carolyn's question earlier, I've got a mask on. How are they going to know I'm sincere? Well, you can tell by looking at someone's eyes. You can tell if they're really interested, right? You can tell if they're talking and I'm doing this. Yeah, okay, I'm writing this down, or I'm taking notes, or yeah, that's interesting. Let me see what I can do. But if you look right at them, if you pay attention, you're indicating to them that you really care. Again, I talked about scanning. You look for things of interest, look at their body language, clothing, look for weapons. Okay, that's something that we all are concerned about, whether it's in the facility or out in the field. Think about, so, you know, you're on the phone and somebody says, well, I'm completely unhappy with you. You don't know what you're doing. I'm just as mad as could be. I'm coming down there right now. Okay. So, you know, in a situation like that, you've got to know how you're going to manage that, and trust your instincts. You will know, does that feel like a threat to you? And if it does, then we have to do something to manage that. Talk about scanning the picture of the motorcycle person here. The reason behind that is when we take motorcycle classes, when we first learn to ride, one of the things they talk about is scanning, and not scanning 3 feet in front of you and 4 feet in front of you, but 20 or 30 feet out to try to see obstacles or hazardous situations well ahead. So that's what we're talking about here. Not necessarily just your immediate area, but look at, you know, the guy coming from the outbuilding over there who's maybe coming to approach you and talk to you as well. Or look at the pickup truck that's pulling up into the driveway with 4 other people in it. So it's important you pay attention to that. When the person walks in the front door, are they by themselves or is someone else coming in with them? And remember that most violence kind of starts small and escalates. It's rare that things just go bang and take off immediately. It happens, but generally it's a result of some escalation that never got halted. So, stay safe. And at the end of the day, guys, again, your safety is absolutely critical. Okay, specific techniques. Okay, so an acronym I use is CLEAR. CLEAR means stay calm, listen, empathize, acknowledge, and come to resolution. Okay, sounds very simple, not as simple as it sounds, and we're going to go through these now. Sometimes, as I said, appropriately, just listening may be enough, but active listening, right? Don't hear them, but listen. Ask them, can I take notes? I'd like to be sure I capture everything you're talking about so I can get you the best solution. When there's a pause in the conversation, repeat back what they said. I think I heard you say this. You said your neighbor called and this was your concern. So repeat back what they say. Don't necessarily try to do what I do often, which is just insert resolutions throughout the conversation. So listen, speak, and feedback to them so that they know that you've understood. Try to remove distractions if you can. Tough to do. Okay, so staying calm. Take 10 if you have the opportunity. Again, you're in the vehicle, you're approaching the home, you've done some background checks. This person is not usually cooperative. They're angry, they're upset. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to scan the area, see what it looks like. I'm going to take some breaths, and I'm going to be prepared for what is quite possibly a conflict. I'm going to check my emotions. Am I already upset before I approach them? Did I have something go wrong with me this morning? Let me calm myself down and compartmentalize that and put it aside. And when I communicate, it's going to be a moderate voice. I'm going to be assertive, but not loudly and aggressively assertive necessarily. I'm not going to start off there. Okay. So take a moment, take 10. If you're on the phone and you're getting upset, the other person on the phone is upset. Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, ma'am. I dropped something on the floor. Let me pick it up just a second. I'll be right back to you. Or excuse me, there's someone else here who can also help, who can get us a resolution to your problem. Take a couple minutes, come back, stop and think to yourself. Someone's standing in front of you and that's happening. And again, you could say, oh, okay, sir. Okay, ma'am, I hear what you're saying. Please give me 2 seconds. Again, let me log into my computer. Let me grab my notebook here. I want to be sure I'm capturing the information as best I can. So please give me just 1 minute and take a moment. Whether you log into the computer, whether you get your notebook or not, doesn't matter. Just take that time to calm yourself down and try to remain under control. Again, you can't control them, but you can control yourself. Okay. Okay, listen. So again, listen actively. Don't interrupt. Don't try to invoke solutions until you fully understand the problem. Tell them you want to take notes. Let them get it out. Let them just vent. Again, one of the example yesterday of the lady who feces complaint. The lady was very upset, and she just went on and on and on. According to the lady who responded, she went on and on and on for quite some time. The responding officer let her get it out. She listened. She paid attention. And when it was all over, she didn't have to do anything. The lady said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm going through this situation, that situation. I know why you're here. I'm going to take care of it." And the problem resolved itself. So don't don't interrupt. Let them get it out. On the phone, it's a little harder. People can go on and on and on. But if you're quiet, eventually people get uncomfortable with the fact that you're not saying anything. Call them by name. Don't call them a name. Call them by name, right? Show them that you're personalizing it, that you care about them. And again, resolution. So one of the things that's taken me, my daughter will call me sometimes, and she wants to vent with me about a situation at work. In fact, she just called me this morning about one. And what I've learned is she would call me to vent with the situation, and I would try to give her some solutions. And she would stop me and say, "Dad, I don't want a solution. I just want you to listen to me." So it's taken me a few years to get that, but I do. And the same thing applies here. So don't interject. Let them get to the end. Be sure you fully understand what they want to say and get some notes. Okay. And again, active listening. Listen with your body, right? Don't be turning away. Don't be fiddling with, something down here. Pay attention. If you're in person, lean forward, or if you're at, at their home, really look at them. Pay attention. If you're on the phone, again, if there's a pause, you don't want to interrupt them. But if there's a pause, say, "Oh my gosh, I understand what you're saying, and what I heard you say was blah blah blah." Right? Repeat back what they're saying. Make them know that you actually heard them, and refer to your notes. Do take notes and use the specifics, right? So that they're aware that you're paying attention. In person, of course, eye contact, don't cross your arms. This conveys that you're reluctant. You're not really receptive to what they're saying. Try to keep a neutral expression. If you have the opportunity to adjust the environment, right? So it could mean, and again, this depends on what your policies are and how comfortable you feel. You're at the front desk. This person comes up to the front desk. They're crying. They're upset. "Oh, sir, excuse me. Come around. Let's go sit over here on the couch in the corner and talk to me and tell me what's wrong." If you have the opportunity to change the environment, or the example that Josh used yesterday where the guy rushed out of the house, well, now all of a sudden they're outside in the yard and things are a little different. It doesn't feel quite so much like you're intruding on their space at their house, and the person calmed down. So if you have the opportunity to do that and it makes sense, that also helps. So, express concern for them, right? Carolyn's example is a great one. Are you okay? What can I do to help you? We'll talk about what your issue is, but first I want to know that you are okay. Make them know that you care about them. If you can, and again, this really only applies if you can be proactive. You're in the field, right? You can know something about the family, maybe you know something about their stressors or their concerns, but people will tell you. If you let them talk, eventually, not always, but generally people will say, "Oh my gosh, this is going on, and that's why this has been so hard. And my dog's been barking because my husband's out of town, my wife's out of town, the dog's home alone." And they will eventually give you some further information. So again, make sure they're okay first. That immediately sets the framework that you're concerned about them. Okay. And that works with a lot of people. Not always, again, if they're rational or not, has a big part to do with it. Okay, and again, so CLEA, A is acknowledge. Acknowledge when they pause, repeat something back. Don't just restate their words, but say something that demonstrates to them that not only did you listen, but you understood, right? Yeah, I understand. I know your wife is out of town and you're having to manage the animals and the kids, and therefore the dogs are home alone a lot and they're barking more. And I get that. It's really hard. You're basically a single parent during that time. And let's talk about what we could do to help with that. Show concern, show understanding, and show that you've listened to them. You can ask them questions that will help them understand other points of concern, like, well, so do your neighbors also have dogs that bark late at night and early in the morning? Is that an issue in general in the neighborhood, and does that make it difficult for you or the kids when you're trying to sleep? Or you can ask questions that are not accusatory in nature, but maybe help them recognize the other point of view. Yeah, there's one neighbor over here, and that used to happen, and I went over and talked to them, and now it doesn't happen anymore. And I can kind of see how that could be a problem. So, ask those kind of questions and acknowledge to them that there are challenges here. Oh my God, these dogs are my family, and I can't possibly lose them. I get it, right? I've got 3 dogs myself, and you know what? We're going to do everything we can to make sure that you can keep your pets. So you can, recognize and acknowledge the challenge. And finally, the R, guys. The R is the resolve part. This is tough, right? This can be the toughest part. You'll resolve it one way or the other, but can you resolve it in such a way that everybody's happy? That's the tough part, right? So, somebody's dog bit someone, and you show up and say, "Look, your dog bit someone, and I'm going to have to take them and have them tested for rabies, while we investigate this." Okay, you can see how that could be a challenging situation, and it has to happen. How you resolve it, you'll resolve it, but will it be something they will feel happy about? You can ask them what you can do, and you can ask for their ideas, but this is a slippery slope. You have to be careful with this. If you ask them their ideas and you leave it sort of an open field, then they can suggest things that are simply not possible. So you can ask that within the context of what you can do within the framework of what you have to solve, right? You can make suggestions. You don't necessarily, and again, you guys understand your policies and your procedures, and I won't pretend to, but is one suggestion, can you make a suggestion that doesn't necessarily end with writing a ticket? I believe you guys, when you're in the field, you have that leeway. Probably on the phone, you can certainly make suggestions like, I know you want to talk to this person. I can't put you on the phone with them right now, but look, why don't we do this? I can make an appointment. I can call you back on the phone, or you can come down here and we can meet in person. So make suggestions that get to the root of what they're trying to resolve, but within the context of what you can do. So for example, I'm on the phone. I want to talk to the CEO of the Denver Dumb Friends League right now. Well, look, the likelihood that A, that's going to happen on the phone right now, and B, that it may ever happen is probably slim to none, but you can make other suggestions. So think of ideas that are creative within the framework of what you have the flexibility to do. And sometimes I said situation resolution is simply not possible. Well, you're going to resolve it again, one way or the other. What I really meant here was a resolution that is agreeable and makes everybody happy. Sometimes it's not going to happen. Again, it comes back to at some point, you may have to be more authoritarian in your approach, depending on how the other person responds. We had a guy yesterday, again, a great example, who prides himself on being a person who can get to yes, who can resolve conflicts and de-escalate things. But he had one recently and he had to take an authoritarian approach. And he said, I went home and I thought about that and I felt bad. I thought, why wasn't I able to make that happen? Why couldn't I do what I usually do? Well, sometimes, guys, you just can't. And it's not because of you. It's likely because the other person is simply not willing to listen. They're not interested in a joint resolution. They're just not going to do it. So I said to him, look, you try your best. If out of 10 of those situations you resolve 9 of them that way and 1 you have to just lay down the law, so be it. It's not on you. Okay. But ultimately, we want to try to get them to say yes. It sounds somewhat Machiavellian, but like in sales, right? If I'm trying to sell you something, I want to try to start asking you questions. This is the old school. Ask you questions where you start to say yes, and then maybe I get you to buy something. So it sounds a little bit contrived, but we're really doing that with good intentions here. Okay. Really what we're after. So, clear, stay calm, listen, empathize, acknowledge, and try to get to resolution. Ultimately, we're trying to reduce the anxiety. We're trying to reduce the potential for violence here. And we're doing that by following steps that indicate to the person we're engaged with that we're paying attention, that we care, that we're listening. And you can practice these skills, right? You can practice them in situations every day at home. Out, again, road rage is a great example. Someone cuts you off and, you're ready to do something. Or I'll give you a good example. I went to the gym it was about a month ago and I pulled into the parking lot and a guy was backing out of a spot and I was going to go in the spot, but then he pulled forward. He was actually just straightening out. And he looked at me and I must have looked angry or something. So I parked and I went over to his vehicle. And he looked at me and he rolled up the window. Like, what is this guy going to do? Right. So I knocked on the window and he rolled the window down about this much. And I said, hey, look, I'm really sorry. I didn't realize you were just straightening out and I didn't mean to kind of get in your way and be aggressive there. So, did that mean anything to me? Could I have just gone into the gym and gone on my own way? I could have, but it was important to me to practice that. You know what? He grinned, he was happy, and I felt better about that. So you can practice little things like that. Those situations are, again, maybe road rage situations. And de-escalation is a mental exercise, and you can practice those quote muscles, if you will, and they'll be ready and available when you need them. Okay, things not to do. There is a list of things not to do. So don't raise your voice, right? I raise my voice, the other person raises their voice. I raise my voice, they raise their voice. This is a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm going to cause the situation to escalate. What I actually do sometimes, and I used to do this in work situations, where someone would be talking to me and getting angry, and as they raise their voice, I would lower my voice. And I made it such that eventually they had to get close to me to listen, and kind of de-escalated the situation without them knowing it, right? Again, getting visibly angry. This guy in the parking lot of the gym, I must have appeared angry. I don't know what I looked like, but when he looked at me, whatever it was caused him to lock his door and roll his window up. And when I approached it, he was only willing to open the window that much. So I obviously appeared angry. I don't know why, and I'm not sure how, but when that happens, you can see that can be the response of the other person, but it could also be that they then get visibly angry. So maybe I approach his door and he throws the door open, and now he gets in my face. And now obviously this situation is getting a little bit out of control. Eye contact versus a stare down, right? Making eye contact, looking at someone, showing concern with your eyes is one thing, but this eyeballing thing, and again, the guy in Mexico, great example. I wasn't eyeballing him, but that's what he thought it was. But having a stare down, there's documented evidence in the animal kingdom, right? If you stare at an animal, it can convey aggression to them, and you can cause animals to become aggressive with you if you stare at them. So it conveys an aggressive message that you don't want to have. So if you're looking at someone, look at someone with concern and empathy in your eyes. We want to try to be problem oriented, or not problem oriented, excuse me. We want to try to get to solutions. So, we don't want to say things like, you're violating this policy, or we have this complaint. Sure, that may be the case. They're violating the policy. There may be a complaint, but a better thing to focus on is what's a resolution like. Hey, look, so we see here that, you've got 6 dogs. I'm making this up, guys. 6 dogs in your pen here. Really, we in Weld County, in the residential areas, it's 4. That's what we limit it to. How did you come on with these other 2 dogs? What happened? Did you inherit them from someone who was getting ready to take them to the pound, or what can we do to kind of help with this situation, as opposed to, you've got 6 dogs. The law is 4. Get rid of 2 of them. Do it now. So be less directive and more, again, more listening to, how to get to a solution. Don't use you statements like, you need to do this or you need to do that. Try to make it a team effort. Like, hey, maybe we can go look at your where your chickens are. Let's go look at the pen, and let's go look at some suggestions we might make to make this better for us. Or maybe we can maybe we could go talk to the neighbor, right? Maybe we can help get to the root of this problem. So use we statements, not you statements. This one is my favorite. Don't say calm down. I don't know about you guys, but if you've ever said this to your significant other, did it work? Probably not. In fact, it probably elicited the opposite reaction. Saying calm down usually causes someone to not calm down. So don't say that, right? That's kind of a trigger phrase, and it implies that they're out of control and you're not. We also don't want to try to get the last word, right? Let people get things out. You can have a conversation, make suggestions, but don't make it such that you feel like, as an authority, whether you're on the phone and, look, I'm not going to take this from you, click, hang up, or someone's at the front desk and, look, sure, you're going to need to just wait and I'll try to help you. Don't try to get the last word. And don't be sarcastic like, oh, well, I see you're here at the facility, so obviously you're an expert. Or someone on the phone is telling you about a medical condition with their pet, and you get sarcastic and, oh, well, obviously you're a veterinarian. Clearly, you know what's going on here. Okay. And don't do all the talking. Again, try to let them get it out, right? So sometimes, and this is unfortunate, and again, this is a big part of my business, sometimes force becomes necessary. We don't want this to be the case. Generally, not much good comes of it. I can't tell you when it's appropriate for you guys specifically. In the field, I'm sure you've got policies and procedures on when someone crosses that line. Certainly in the building, if you're behind the front desk, you're probably not the person who's going to implement force if someone needs to be removed from the building. And on the phone, of course, it's obviously much different. So, let's start with out in the field. If possible, you're only going to use force to defend yourself or defend other innocent people. Even in environments outside of what we're talking about today, walking on the street, I tell everybody, think about where your moral and ethical line in the sand is. It's not your responsibility to use force in all situations, but think about what is important to you. If you are a person who is in a role, again, out in the field primarily, where force could be an option, be prepared, be practiced, and be alert, right? So, be ready to do it if you need to. On the phone, you can be forceful with your voice, right? You can use force in terms of, excuse me, how you're communicating with someone. But specifically here, we're talking about something physical. So everything we're talking about today is in an effort to avoid this. But if we have to, we have to. Okay. Okay. So that's that segment, guys. So the next piece we're going to do is we're going to go through the scenarios. I will tell you right now, the scenarios are tougher in an online platform like this, as opposed to in person, where we can do real role playing and involve other people. But I think they're valuable, and I think it gives us food for thought. So we will pause here for two things, again, to sanity check and see if anybody has questions they'd like to either unmute and ask or put in the chat room. And then we'll also take another a quick bio break, however Carrie sees fit. Okay, I'll give you one more funny example while you guys are seeing if you have any questions, since we're a minute or two ahead. My cousin is a veterinary surgeon, and he works at VRCC, Veterinary Referral Clinic of Colorado. So it's a high-speed veterinary surgical clinic. His name is Chad. Chad had a guy come in, a guy and his wife, and the guy was a hockey player for the Rockies. I forget who it was now, but he was a defenseman. So big athletic guy. They brought their puppy in. Their puppy needed heart surgery. The puppy had had that heart surgery twice before. So doing it a third time was quite risky. And Chad told him it was quite risky. But he said, hey, I can do this. He had supreme confidence. He was going to do it. He operated on the dog, and the dog died. So he told me one of the scariest moments of his life was the hockey player came into the clinic, very calm, not gesturing, not yelling, not displaying any sort of signs of being angry, but got close to him and just looked at him and said, what happened? So yeah, this is a person who you would probably be afraid of, because they're calm and in control and obviously supremely confident. And he was a complete gentleman. But when Chad told me this story, he said, I expect when somebody's mad, they're yelling or, raising hell or whatever, but this guy was completely calm. So anyway, sometimes be aware of the person who looks completely calm. Okay, looks like no questions, Carrie. So we can do one of two things, and I'll leave it up to you guys. We could roll, let's see. I got one here. Let's see. Looking for finding common ground works really well. One example, this is from Jessica. Thank you, Jessica. Is I work a lot of rural communities. My background in agriculture helps with building my relationships with them. Man, that is so true. My parents live on a farm, and farmers love talking to people who like to talk about farming. They like to talk about animals and crops and fertilizer. And if someone comes to the door to talk to my dad and they're ready to talk farming, he will gab their head off. Someone comes to the door and wants to talk about, solar energy, he probably doesn't have time for them. So that's a great example. Even if you don't have that background, right? Maybe you can think about it ahead of time. You can look at, do some research ahead of time. Like, look, hey, I see they're disking your fields right now. I guess you're getting ready to plant corn, and it looks like your winter wheat is coming up and doing well. You can make common ground even if you don't have it. This is a great example. Thank you, Jessica.
So Mike, do you want to take a 5 or 10-minute break?
Maybe we'll give people, if you're okay with it, Carrie, give them 10 minutes. People can go use the restrooms and check email and whatnot. And, we're a little bit ahead like we were yesterday. So if you're okay, we can do that, and then we can resume after that.
Sure, that's fine with me. So we'll just plan on starting again in about 10 minutes. So
Sounds good.
2:52.
Sound good.
Mike, we can give people a few more minutes if you want to, or a couple of minutes. Or
Sure,
if you're
Carrie.
ready to start now, we're
No, that's fine. If we think we should give them a few more minutes, no worries.
okay.
Here's some amusement for you to show you how much of a dog person I am. This was the birthday card I got from my parents. Yeah, so they know.
Okay, Mike, I think we're good to get started again.
Okay. So on the break, guys, I thought of a somewhat related and kind of a funny story I think you'll enjoy, but Jessica's comment made me think of it. It has to do with rapport and approach. So as I said, my parents live on a farm. They live out in Fort Lupton, and my dad tells the story that one day there's a knock on the door. So he goes to the door and he opens it and he says, "There's this guy standing there, this big guy with long blonde hair, and he's got these armbands and this leather vest." And he said, the guy looks at me and says, "I'm Dog." So Dog the Bounty Hunter, for those of you that know, right? Shows up at my parents' farm in Fort Lupton. And so he says to my dad, "I'm Dog." And my dad looks at him and says, "Well, I'm Bob. What the hell do you want?" So it's a funny story in that it relates to how you approach and assumptions, right? So Dog assumed that, first of all, everybody would know who he was, and in his approach, right? Rather than coming to the door and, trying to be somewhat more, cordial, if you will. Long story short, Dog had come to the wrong house, but for a long time, I watched his TV show to see if my dad would be on, but obviously they cut that. So Anyway, so I've quit sharing, guys. I don't have anything else to show you, but we're going to go through scenarios now. And again, I recognize this is challenging, on this platform, online like this remote. What I'm going to do is I'm going to describe a scenario. And pardon me, what I'd like you to do is if you have a comment or a feedback, what you're looking for and what tools you might have at your disposal or what you might do in this situation. You can unmute yourself and speak up, or again, you can put comments in the chat. Again, I know it's tough. I know participation this way is tricky at best, but if you can see your way clear, I'd love to have some commentary from you guys. So let me start with one here. So a person walks into the facility. You're at the front desk and they're yelling and gesturing and they want to speak to the person in charge. And obviously that's not you. You're sitting at the front desk. You get the person in charge out. You're right this minute. I want to talk to them. They're clearly upset. They're clearly, angry. What do you do in that? So first of all, what would you observe and what tools do you have at your disposal in that situation? I mean, now I'm not going to stand here all day. I want to talk to the person in charge. Where is that person? I have a problem. And if you can't find them, I will come in the facility and find them myself. Okay, well, let me talk through this a bit, guys. So, look, their body language is obvious, right? Yeah, look. So, Nicole, thank you, Nicole. Observe their body language and yeah, introduce yourself. Try to establish a rapport. Hi, my name's Nicole. How are you? Boy, I'm really sorry. I can tell something's really not right. What can I do to help you? Tell me what your situation is. Carolyn, right? Ask them specifically who they want to talk to. Was it somebody in surgery or somebody in administration, or who is it you'd like to talk to? Tell me a little bit about your issue because I really want to solve this for you, right? Stacy and Chris, good comment. They're angry, right? Maybe you have to take a step back and again, who are you? Hi, my name's Stacy. Look, I can tell you're upset. Tell me what you need. Again, establish that rapport. Demonstrate some empathy and try to get to the bottom of what the situation is by asking them questions and try to tone it down a little bit. So great answers. Okay. So let's see. You go to a residence. You're out in the field, and this is one I used when I was talking earlier. You go to the residence, you knock on the door. Hey, look, excuse me, but your dog is bitten someone. The neighbor over here said your dog's bitten someone. And so I need to take your dog to make sure they've had the rabies vaccination and do some investigation. Let me take a pause for just a second. Janelle, I hope you said your name wrong. She came in with a comment. Or he, I apologize if I got that wrong. You could say something like, I can assist you in the best way I can, and then I might know how to direct you. Front desk example. So another great comment. So here I am, I'm at the front door. Your dog's bitten someone. I'm going to have to take the dog so we can get it tested for rabies, and I'm going to investigate. And thank you. Good, I pronounced it right. And so now I'm the person's door. I'm like, no, you're not taking my dog. That's not happening. And now I get angry. I get upset. I'm visibly agitated. If you go in the backyard where my dog is, you're trespassing on private property, and I will take whatever action I deem necessary to prevent you from taking my dog. So here's a person who's upset and they're simply refusing to comply. Okay, Shiloh, ask for their side of the story, reasoning behind the actions. Why are you, what's the reason that I'm here? Public health risk, disease, right? Could the dog have a disease? Maybe Carolyn, instead of telling why you're here, introduce yourself and ask them if they know why you're here. Hey, my name's Mike. I'm an animal control officer. Do you have any insight into why I'm here to talk to you? Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Stacy, here's a good comment. Our organization does not take the dog. We do a 10-day quarantine in their home. Great, right? Maybe that's okay. We'll do a 10-day quarantine in your home. And show, look, I know this is your dog, but it did bite someone, and we need to investigate. We want to make sure that person's not in jeopardy. We want to make sure your dog is okay, right? So, show some empathy. But again, at some point, they may simply refuse. Sarah's good comment here. Hey, come on out here. Can you come on out? We can talk out here outside. It might be a little easier. It's a nice day out. We'll get some sun. And by the way, you have a beautiful property. Maybe we can take advantage of the nice day and have a chat. So it makes you feel better. You're safer. They're not in the house. It makes them feel, like they're not trapped. In this scenario, somebody came up with a great suggestion in this scenario yesterday. Well, we really kind of need to take your dog to get it tested, or we need to quarantine it, get it tested. But you know what? If you have their rabies vaccination, can you just show it to me? Maybe you've got it. Maybe, that part of the problem goes away. Again, at the end of the day, if they simply refuse to either A, quarantine the dog, or B, let you take the dog to quarantine it, whatever the procedure is, that's when you maybe have to get more directive. But this is, again, not a situation where there's no immediate life-threatening situation. And if it escalates into, potential violence, like if you go in my backyard, you're trespassing, and I have every right to defend my property. Well, that's a pretty clear threat. And that's not something you would want to risk your life over. Maddie has a good comment here. The root of authority, you let them know you need to come back with a warrant if you can. Yeah, at some point, you may have to take that directive route. Look, I'm sorry, sir, ma'am. I really want to make this work for both of us, but I have to make sure that person who was bit is okay. I have to make sure your dog is okay. So I'd like to resolve this today, but if I can't, I will come back, and, we don't want it to be more difficult. So that's a tough one, right? Okay, so here's one. So a client calls, they're on the phone, and they are talking nonstop. They're not listening to you. They're not taking any feedback or suggestions. They are just ranting. They're going on and on and on about what a terrible organization this is. We had a good example that came from one of the members here, that somebody came and adopted a cat. And the cat had, and I apologize, I don't remember the disease the cat had, but it's very contagious. The animal organizations don't test for it. And so the lady adopted the cat. She had cats that she adopted at home. She had the cat tested before she took it home and found out that it had this disease. And so she went and had it euthanized. And she was very upset, as you can imagine. She just adopted this cat. She wanted to take it home. She found out it was sick, and she had to immediately have it euthanized. She didn't have to do that. She could have come back to the facility, but the story was she lived several hours away. So she calls up and she's upset. And why do you not test for this ahead of time? Why did you put me with an animal that was compromised, that would compromise my other animals? And she's talking nonstop, without giving you time to get a word in edgewise. What would be some things you might do in this situation? Jessica, good response. Just listen. When they take a breath, when they give you a break, just what you said here, Jessica, repeat back what they're saying. Explain, you understand, boy, I'm really sorry. That's horrible. You adopted a cat. You probably got attached to it quickly. You were going to take it home. And the rationale behind it, of course, is that for some reason, I don't know what the reason is, the animal organizations don't test for this disease. There's a policy about it. But just listening to them, why don't you come on back in? Let's see if we can put you with another animal. Let's see what we can do to help make this right. Let them take a breath. So Nicole, perfect, right? Let them talk and talk and talk. Eventually they're going to take a breath. Jen, let them talk themselves out. They will eventually, right? You can get a lot of information. That's a great point. You can be taking notes about who the person is. What's bothering them? Is it the fact that they really got attached to the cat in such a short period of time? Is it the fact that they think the animal organization was remiss in didn't do what they should have done, right? So what's really behind their concerns? Sarah, listen to them express empathy, understand their frustration, maybe provide a free adoption for another cat. Yeah, if you get to the bottom of it and it's a financial thing, like I paid this money and then I couldn't keep the cat. My guess is that the people who we deal with that do this stuff, it's not generally a financial thing necessarily. It's that they become attached to these animals, right? And so Carolyn, another great comment, empathize, right? Boy, I'm really sorry. I can't imagine how I would react in that situation, but let me see if I can find someone that can help you figure out a resolution. So great comments, guys. And you're absolutely right. Listening, empathy, right? And to the previous example, sometimes it becomes authoritarian. Crystal, good comment. Let her run herself out. Yep. We don't normally test for it. I understand why this could be devastating for you, right? You became attached to the animal. Maybe we can speak to somebody who can listen to your feedback. Maybe we should change the policy, right? So let me get you in contact with someone who has some influence. Those are all great examples. Okay, so here's one. There you look out, so you're at the front desk, you look outside and you see somebody immediately outside the door of the facility and they've got their cell phone camera and they're videoing all around. They're videoing people coming and going. They're stopping people walking into and leaving the facility and they're having conversations with those people. How might you approach this? That's all the information you have. Good answer, Jessica. Go out and introduce yourself. Hi, my name's Jessica. Is there something I can do to help you? No, I'm just videoing. Thanks. Yeah, so good point, Jen. Before you approach them, make sure they look calm, right? If they look angry and upset, maybe you don't really want to approach them. Maybe you want to get somebody else to help you with that. Shiloh, again, good answer. Ask if there's anything you can do to help. Introduce yourself. Nicole, good answer. Carolyn, this is awesome. Use your flight attendant voice. Introduce yourself and ask what brings them there today. Let someone know what was, before you're going outside. That's good. If you're going to place yourself potentially in jeopardy, be sure someone else knows, or maybe bring someone else along with you. So we do that, and the person says, no, I don't need any help. I'm just going to stand here and video. Now remember, they're right outside the door of the facility, and they're talking to people. They're calm. They seem rational, but they are asking people how the service was. They're asking people if they're upset. Did you adopt an animal? Did you bring an animal here to be euthanized? How did they treat you? Maddie, good question. May I ask why you're videotaping our patrons? Well, I just want to. All right. I'm here to make sure that you guys are providing good service. Don't infringe on my First Amendment rights. Nicole's good comment. Remind them to be cognizant. Not everyone may want to be videotaped. Be respectful of others' privacy. What about this, guys? If they're at the door, they're on your organization's property. Now, good comment by Crystal. Tell them it's fine. Ask them to be mindful of other patrons. If they're on your property, and there's different rules if you're a government organization versus a private organization, what we will see, and this is the First Amendment auditor scenario, in case you guys haven't guessed that. So, oftentimes, what people who are these First Amendment auditors want to do is elicit a response. So you come out and I'm sorry, you can't videotape here. Yes, I can. It's my First Amendment right, and you can't stop me. Are you going to try to kick me off the property? Are you going to get physical with me? Why are you not letting me do this? So there's a couple different situations. If it's private property, then you do not have to let them be on your property in video. Sir, ma'am, if you'd like to, you can go out there to the sidewalk. That's public property. You can go out there and video to your heart's content. You can ask people when they come out, do they want to be videoed? Do they mind? You can ask them questions, but you really can't be here at the door. This is our property. Now, the rules in government facilities are a little different. If there's no express prohibition, then they may be able to be that close. So you have to be aware of what the rules are on your property. And at the end of the day, we're concerned about our clients, the people who are coming to see us, not the person with the phone. But the watchword here, guys, is exactly what you guys are saying in the comments. Be respectful, be calm, be polite, but calmly say to them, look, please go out onto the public area, go step out on the sidewalk, do what you want. But our policy is that you're on our private policy or private property. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to leave. Well, I'm really sorry to hear that because you are trespassing. And if we can't come to an agreement here, I am going to have to call the police and have you cited for trespassing and removed. Very calm, very polite, very professional. Don't prompt any sort of engagement that's going to end up, posted on the internet. So good comments, guys. And be very careful when you do this. Let's see, Sarah, good comment. Be sure that someone knows you're going out there and they can watch, or maybe they can come with you. And Carolyn, good point. Maybe give them a deadline, right? Look, I'm going to accommodate you. I'm going to try to be reasonable. You can be out here for another 5 minutes, but then you're going to have to move on. I would really appreciate it. And that shows that you're willing to compromise with them. Okay. So let's see here. So somebody walks into the facility, come up to the front desk, and they're extremely distressed, emotionally distressed, perhaps even in tears, right? I'm at the counter and, and I can hardly get my words out. I'm crying, I'm upset, and I don't appear angry, but I can't even really get out what's bothering me. What might be an approach there? Good suggestions, guys. Maddie and Carolyn, sit them down. Offer them some water. Taking a drink helps calm people down. Ask them if can we go someplace private? Maybe you'd feel more comfortable talking to me in private. Get them some water. Give them a moment. Get them some tissues. Right. This is an ideal situation where getting them to a different environment could help. Maybe they probably want to talk to you. They're here at the facility, but I'm uncomfortable. Pardon me, I'm a guy, I'm crying in front of a bunch of people and it's really hard for me. And boy, if we could go somewhere private, that would really help. Great comments, guys. Good responses. Okay, so now I'm on the phone, and I used this one a little bit earlier as well. I'm on the phone with the phone support person who's trying their best to solve my problem. I wanted to adopt this dog, and I filled out the form, and then somebody else adopted it first, and I was first in line. I know I was, and I live by myself, and I really wanted a dog for a companion. I can't believe what an incompetent organization you are. So you try to talk to them. We can perhaps find you another dog. Come on down. We'll walk you through the area. We'll see what we could do. We could make something happen expeditiously. Nope. You are completely incompetent, and I am super unhappy. I'm coming down there right now, and we're going to sort this out in person. So what do you do in that situation? And then they hang up, by the way. So I'm coming down there to sort this out in person. Click. Yeah. Notes, Carolyn, good example. Shiloh, yeah, get some backup, have a person there. Sarah, manager or a supervisor, make everyone aware of the situation, make the staff know that this is happening. Point person, certainly the front desk people, and get a hold of management, let them know. Hopefully in your course of talking to this person, Crystal, good point. You've made good notes. In talking to this person, hopefully you know who they are. Sir or ma'am, let me have your name and let me see if I can get to the what's behind it. And you maybe know that information before they show up. Big Pops, that's a cool screen name. Offer an appointment, right? Yeah. Hey, look, I hear you. Come on in. We'll get you an appointment. Have you talk to someone. And when they show up, look at them. This is a great comment. Situational awareness. Are they sweating? Are they huffing? Are they red in the face? Are they under the influence of something? And whatever you do, of course, don't put yourself in jeopardy. But the theme here, guys, is spot on. Try to know information about this person ahead of time. And if they say that and they hang up on you, we have to take it seriously. When you read The Gift of Fear, and I hope you do, Gavin de Becker makes a point that if you think something's wrong, it's probably wrong. So again, trust your intuition and tell other people. Be aware when the person shows up. Hopefully you know their name and you can assess their demeanor. So great comments there. Okay, so let's use the Weld County example for a moment. That was a particularly egregious one, I thought. And I don't know all the background. You guys probably know it better than I do, but you approach the residence and there's a pen there and there's dead animals and live animals and maybe there's some food, maybe there's not. And as you approach, and I'm exaggerating, this did not happen, but I'm using that as the basis of the example. As you approach, the person exits the house, a lady, and says, "You're trespassing. You need to leave immediately. And if you don't, I am going to defend my property by any means necessary." What would you do? Good comment, Carolyn. Ma'am, I'm sorry. Do you have a few moments to speak with me? Right? Respond professionally. Shiloh, this is a great comment. If someone says to me, "If you don't leave, I'm going to defend my property," that to me is a threat. So leave and call for backup. Get sheriff's deputies, get the police. This is a situation where you probably need to escalate it and get the heck out of there. You could also try to preclude that, Nicole's comment, if possible. Look, here's why I'm here. Can I talk to you for just a moment, right? Will they, accede to that, or will they say no? Sarah, good comment. Body language, right? Look at the picture. Is it safe? Look at their hands. Look at their waist. That's where their tools are. Does it look like they have a weapon? How close are they? How far away? Do you have space? But again, in the situation I described, nobody's life is in jeopardy. So you have the opportunity to, advance in the opposite direction. We don't like to say retreat, but advance in the opposite direction and go get some help, right? Great comments, guys. Let's use, I'll see if you guys come to the same conclusion that actually happened. So my cousin Chad, so the hockey player, right? Chad admitted to me that, there was probably some level of overconfidence on his part. Hockey player brings the dog in, the dog needs heart surgery. Chad knew that doing that heart surgery a third time was highly risky. He also knew that without the heart surgery, the dog was going to die. But he said, "Hey, I'm Chad Devitt. I can do the surgery. I know what I'm doing." So he did the surgery and the dog died. And here's the hockey player, right? Big athletic guy. He's got like 800 penalty minutes or something. So we know he's a tough guy. And, he gets close to Chad, not invading his personal space, but close to him, and says in a very calm voice, "What happened?" Right? Kind of a scary situation, almost scarier than somebody who's emotional. So tell me how you think you would respond, and I'll tell you how Chad actually responded, and we'll see if we're in sync. Shiloh, good response. Explain what happened. Be descriptive. Don't use jargon, right? Don't use surgical professional jargon that they won't understand, and be sympathetic. Yeah. So what Chad did is he said, "Look, Jim," I forget what his name was. Here, let me read these other examples. Take a step back, apologize, explain it in layman's terms. Again, good. You could approach it, you could give them play-by-play in layman's terms. That's a great idea too. Tell them precisely what happened, where things went wrong, what you think could have happened different, and be sympathetic. So guys, that's exactly what Chad did. He said to the guy, hey, look, come on over here. Let's go sit down. Let me tell you what went on. And he was very sympathetic, offered him a seat. Sarah, good comment. And said, look, let me explain to you what happened. As we talked about ahead of time, you know, it was a risky surgery because it was the third time, but we all knew that if we didn't do this, you know, the dog was going to die. And I really thought I could do it. I did my best. And, you know, I did. I can't even pretend to explain what he would have done, but, you know, I did this and I went in, I removed this blockage and I sutured that. And at this point, you know, the dog's arteries were very thin and deteriorated from previous surgeries, and they began to bleed, and I couldn't stop it. And yeah, in very layman's terms, but you have to gauge their response. Again, this guy's a hockey player, and not to stereotype, but he's probably used to violence and blood, and talking about, you know, a vein or artery rupturing and bleeding is probably not going to make him sick, whereas someone else who's less attuned or less used to that kind of thing, maybe they don't want that level of detail. But the gist of it is, sit them down, try to make them comfortable. I'm really sorry. I know how much this dog meant to you. Obviously, you brought him in for 3 surgeries, so clearly you cared about him. And I'm telling you, I absolutely tried my best. I'm good at this, and I didn't get it done this time. Here's the reason why. So good comments, guys. Okay, one more. So you're an animal control officer, and you show up at the home, and you're, you know, at the front door, and the resident comes to the front door, and I walk up behind you, and I'm doing this. Okay, so I'm behind you on this person's property. You have no idea who I am. Clearly, I'm videoing you. Okay, you have no idea if I know the resident, if I don't know the resident, or who I am, but now I'm behind you and I've got my phone in my hand. What would you do in that situation? Carolyn, turn around and smile. Great example. You know, maybe you disarm the person by being friendly. So you turn around and smile, and I just stay here. I'm videoing you. Right? Nicole, good question. How can I help you? Oh, you can't. I'm just going to video you while you do your job. Yep. Introduce yourself. Say why you're there. Ask if they know the resident, right? Yeah. And really good comment, Shiloh. Make sure that you are not trapped. You're not stuck somewhere between that person and the residence, and you can move and get away if you need to. Jessica, good comment. Introduce yourself. Ask if they're the person who you're looking for. You don't know. Could be the person who lives there, right? Big Pops, this is a great, you know, this looks like someone who's probably got a little bit of law enforcement background here. Bladed stance. Ask the homeowner if they know this person. Excuse me, do you know this person? Is it okay for them to be on your property and do videotaping? And if so, okay. Just continue to do what you do professionally. If you're doing nothing wrong, tango on. Great job. Don't get tangled up. Make sure you've got space and be professional, right? As long as you're not doing anything out of sorts, I don't care if they videotape me. I don't want them behind me, right? So I might say to them, hey, look, excuse me, you could video me. Could you move over there, please? Just, it would make me feel a little better if I could see you. Be professional about it. Stacy and Chris, yeah, be professional, do your job. Nicole, our officers wear body cameras. So yeah, that's a great comment. Hey, that's fine. You can videotape me. I've got a body camera on as well. So just so you know, all of this interaction is going to be recorded, including my interaction with you. And Tanya, this is a really good, and this is kind of disarming. Hi, are you here to join us on the inspection? So again, you know, this situation might be a person who's a quote First Amendment auditor. And maybe the homeowner says, I have no idea who that person is. And no, I don't want them on my property videotaping anything. Okay, sir, ma'am, please step off the property, go out there into the public space on the sidewalk or the street, video to your heart's content, but the homeowner doesn't want you here. or the homeowner says, yes, that's okay, I want them here, they can videotape. And back to big Pop's response, look, don't do anything wrong. Do your job, be professional, and be prepared. But you have nothing to be afraid of in terms of somebody simply recording. So great responses, guys. Okay, so that, and again, I apologize. I know scenarios, this is tough. It's tough interactively. You guys were awesome today. You were much more engaged, not engaged, that's the wrong word, but you had much more questions and comments than the group yesterday. They were a quieter group. They had good comments and good examples, but you guys were awesome. So I'm going to stop there. Opportunity, we have more Q&A time now if you want to. Anything is game, guys. So if you want any questions, we'll hang on for a bit. And if not, I think, Carrie, it's up to you. I think yesterday what we said to people is if they had no questions, they could drop off. But I'll let you, back to you.
Yeah, that's fine. If there's no other questions, then we can go ahead and in the training session. But it looks like there is a question.
Maddie, good example. What's an example of de-escalation that's gone wrong for you? And what did I learn from it? Well, boy, I've made more than my share of mistakes. I will tell you that, so I have a daughter who is everything in the world to me. And now she's well beyond this, but when she was a teenager, if there was a bad guy in the world, she found him. She had her share of bad boyfriends. And I, at one time, there was a boyfriend and the situation was devolving. And luckily for me, he was 18. He wasn't 17 or 16. And, I was concerned about what was going on and her leaving with him. And so I went to where he was and had a very close face-to-face conversation with him. And he decided he was going to be tough, and I decided I was going to be tough. And it devolved into a physical altercation. And it was, so I hurt him, right? He got hurt. I got a little hurt, but he got hurt. And what happened from that was it didn't solve anything. So first of all, I actually felt bad about it later on. I didn't like the guy, but there was no reason for that. Number one. Number two, then my daughter, of course, was sympathetic with him. So it was, I could have easily done something different. I could have made him feel as if I was involved without having it go that way. So I really try my best to avoid those things. Again, the thing in Mexico is a good example. So, and Nicole has a comment here. One thing I would say is don't make assumptions. 100%. Scenario where an individual frantically pounded on the door. Generally, it's an irate individual, but instead, upon opening the door, I found out it was an individual who was deaf. Yeah, that's a great example, Nicole. They were frantic to pick up their dog, couldn't make an appointment due to their deafness. Important not to make those assumptions. That is 100% true. So here's a case where it could have gone bad, and instead you took the time to learn, and probably some good came from that in the sense that you guys probably discussed after the fact, what should we do to accommodate people who are hearing impaired? So great example. But yeah, back to let me see, Maddie. That was a really bad example on my part. I wished it had never happened, and my daughter eventually forgave me for that. But boy, it was not a good thing to do. So let's see, Big Pops. One of my concerns is if a group shows up at our facility. Yeah, right. I'm the only male with 12 women, so my automatic response is to protect them. Advice on de-escalation of groups. So I touched on this briefly, but we didn't talk about it a lot. So de-escalation of a group monkey dance, right? So here are people, mob mentality. It is not ideal. And yes, we are protectors, whether it's 12 women or 12 teenagers or, whatever, right? It's people, those of us who are what we refer to as sheepdogs, right? We are protectors. And in that situation, the best thing you can do is, of course, try to get backup. Point specifically at a person. Don't say somebody call 911. Point at a person. You know, Stacy, call 911, right? And you can engage with the group and say, look, we don't want this to escalate. We don't want this to happen. Again, you can probably not reason too much with a group, and you certainly not with a group who's got an agenda already. So what you've described is literally one of the worst situations we could be in. If you can get to a safe place, if you can barricade yourself, if you can lock the doors, get help, call 911. If none of that's possible, if you're out in the parking lot when this happens, you know, the best thing you can do is cluster in a group and make them aware, look, guys, there's 10 of you, there's one of me, and I've got these other people who can't protect themselves. And I want you to know that I really don't want this to happen, but if it happens, I'm prepared to deal with it. And it's probably a particularly weird example, but if you've ever watched the movie with Kurt Russell, the Wyatt Earp movie, where he's surrounded by a small group of guys, and one of them says, let's rush him, we can get him. And Kurt Russell says, you might get me, but you're the first. So again, you have to, in that case, you got to show some aggression and some strength. Tombstone, that's it, Pops. That's the one, buddy. Okay, Carolyn, at our facility, we have large family groups that come in, and our COVID guidelines have limited the number who enter the building. Doors are always locked. We have cameras everywhere so we can see who's coming before they enter. And we have a second locked breezeway if they try to rush the door. Outstanding. So if you can see before they enter, that's ideal, right? Typically, cameras only show you what happened after the fact. But if the doors are secured and you can see on the camera ahead of time, that gives you a huge situational awareness advantage.
Okay, does anybody else have any other questions or comments for Mike?
Jessica, other sources for study or additional trainings. So we're gonna, Carrie's asked me for some comments to put in a survey. In there, I mentioned some other training that's available. The books I talked about are great. And there's a wealth of information online. If you were to Google, for example, situational awareness or de-escalation, but there's no substitute, guys, for practicing it. So, you know, if you have the opportunity, do something in person where we do role playing, we put a little stress on you and try to put you in that situation. It's nothing like the real thing, but there's a lot of resources. Final question from Big Pops. What would you do if you caught someone stealing a dog from the facility? Boy, that's a really good question. So it would depend on my role. So first of all, I'm very protective of dogs. I can tell you if I caught someone trying to steal my dog, it would immediately devolve into a physical confrontation. Not going to happen. I'm sorry. From your facility, I guess it would depend on my role. You know, I don't, if I'm the person, let's say, who I'm an administrative person, you know, I'm maybe not trained to deal with violence. I'm maybe not trained to intervene. Am I willing to, is my line in the sand to risk my life or my livelihood because someone's stealing a dog? I don't mean to minimize that because I think it's a horrible thing. But when I train people for self-defense, I tell them, I want you to think about your moral and ethical line in the sand. What are you prepared to use violence for? So for example, someone puts their hands on my daughter, we are going to go. If I'm around a school and kids are getting hurt, we are going to go. If I get hurt in the meantime, I'm willing to accept that. But, you know, someone stealing a dog from the facility, that's probably more of a gray area for me. I hate it and I wouldn't want it to happen. But if I don't have authority or responsibility, I could end up in trouble. I try to stop that person, physical confrontation ensues, and they sue me. Right. So I have to decide ahead of time if that's worthwhile. How do you, here's a great question, Carolyn. How do you deflect people when they approach you in public? Really good question, Carolyn. What I do is, so first of all, it depends on how we look, right? I will tell you, and again, I don't mean this to sound the way it sounds, but I rarely get approached that way. I guess I have that look and I'm a little bit bigger. But if someone were to approach me, I hold out my hand and in a loud and vigorous voice, I got nothing for you, right? And I keep walking, and I always look like I'm walking with a purpose. If I'm lost, I will be lost with a purpose, right? So I will be vigorous. I will, be very obvious to them. I can't help you, and keep on walking, right? And I don't care what this, I'm not afraid of embarrassing someone or embarrassing myself. Don't be afraid to do that. Um, I can show you, I'll show you some, maybe I'll put some tricks together for you, but I have some. But in general, it's being sure you're walking with your head up. You're not doing this, right? You're facing the phone. So being aware and glancing at someone, again, not eyeballing them. There's someone there. I look at them, maybe I acknowledge them, right? Nod your head, keep going. But look like you have a purpose, look like you're going somewhere, and look like you are not a victim. Carolyn, I have people walk with me in a grocery store and it says staff in giant letters on back of our clothing. I always think about how everything we say represents our organization. Boy, that's a great comment, right? You say something, you disparage someone, you say something nasty or rude, and it will reflect on your organization, right? So you have a couple choices, guys. You could say, well, I'm out of work, I can say what I want. Well, that's absolutely true. It's true, right? We live, fortunately, in a country where you can do that, but it will reflect. Somebody could call then your organization and say, one of your staff members was in the grocery store and they were unbelievably rude to the stocking clerk. The poor kid was just trying to make a living and they were yelling at him. And what kind of people do you have working there? So keep it in mind, first of all, keep in mind that that kid's trying to make a living, right? So try not to be rude to service people. There's no excuse for that. On the other hand, you could take your jacket or your vest or change shirts or something, right? You could do something like that. But in general, I mean, don't be rude. Okay, Big Pops. Given the medium and larger precautions due to COVID, you've done an out. Thank you very much. Outstanding job conveying the info, keeping us engaged. Uh, Boy, that's really, thank you very much for the comment, Big Pops. I really appreciate it. You guys have been an awesome group, and I love doing this stuff. I do it because I think part of the reason I do this is to give back. If you are out in this area, or if I'm out in Rifle, please reach out and let's get together and have coffee or talk about some of this stuff more. Carolyn, thank you. I'm happy to spend more time if if the organization deems it beneficial. I'm more than happy to do that. And in case you can't tell, I truly enjoy doing this. I do it for a lot of reasons. It is my business, but I also do it because I think it's the right. I'll tell you guys another quick story before everybody goes. I was at a Memorial Day parade downtown about 10 years ago, and there was an old fella down there, probably 89, 95 years old, had a hat on that said 2nd Ranger Battalion. And I happen to know that the 2nd Ranger Battalion were the people who scaled the cliffs at Point du Hoc up a bunch up above the beaches at Normandy because they knew there was artillery up there. So the 2nd Ranger Battalion was going to scale those cliffs. And so this guy was one of them. So I said to him, tell me about it. Tell me the story about the training. And he looked at me and he said, well, son, again, he was like 95, right? He said, well, son, it was the right thing to do. He said, they told us 8 out of 10 of us would die going up that cliff, but it was the right thing to do. So anyway, part of the reason I do this stuff, guys, is, I think it's the right thing to do. Author of Getting to Yes. Let me look really quick on my notes and I'll tell you who that is, guys. Bear with me a moment. Fisher, Fischer, and Ury, Ury. Those are the co-authors, Stacy. So Jessica, my current situation, I work solo a lot. Yeah, previous position, there were multiple officers there on the scene. What pointers do you have for supporting, but also holding another official accountable when the one's escalating a situation or adding to it? So that's really a good point. So, you're with another officer and they are being aggressive and, maybe escalating a situation you think doesn't need to be escalated. That's tough because, of course, you don't want to have an argument in front of the person, right? You don't want to sort of impugn their credibility with the person and cause it to escalate that way. Um, but what I would probably do, you probably can't do anything in the heat of that moment. You probably have to let it go. And afterwards, I'd have a conversation with that person saying, look, this is a problem and here's the reason why. And here's some things we should have done differently and see what their feedback is. But maybe approach them like, hey, is everything okay with you? You seem not yourself today. I know you're a nicer person than that. You were out of sorts, right? But find out what's driving that. And if it's a person, who is consistently doing that, well, then you have a decision to make. Is it worth escalating that with that other officer? Kelly, can you share the recording? I told Marissa and Carrie, I told the whole group that it's your recording. The PowerPoint is yours to do with what you want. This belongs to you guys, so it's entirely up to you how or what you share with your team. Okay. Tips for de-escalating where the aggressor is in a higher position of authority or with another agency. So look, at the end of the day, guys, ethically, I mean, let me be sure I understand this question. So is the question, Jessica, that the person who's being aggressive, who's escalating a situation is maybe a more senior officer? I think that's maybe what you're saying. And again, look, the same thing I understand, right? We don't want to jeopardize our jobs, but we're jeopardizing probably more than our jobs if we let that go on. So, maybe what I would do is approach it from a mentoring approach, like, officer so-and-so, I've really learned a lot from you and I'm observing you, but boy, I've learned a lot from you. And boy, that last interaction was really kind of tense. Is that typical or what would you normally do? So let's see, I was out recently where local police chief escalated by unnecessarily threatening to come into someone's home. Jessica, there's nothing you can do there, right? I mean, you can observe, you can be a good witness, you can be supportive of the homeowner if you feel it's inappropriate. And it's unfortunate. There are a few like that, not many. Most of our law enforcement people are, by God, hardworking and dedicated to our safety. Every so often, something like that happens. You can't intervene, right? You can't get in the middle of that. Police officer, all you could do is be a witness, take notes, and decide after the fact if this is something that you want to report on. But at that moment, you can't get in the middle of it. You guys are very welcome. I appreciate the nice comments. Like I said, Carrie, I know and Marissa are working on sending out a survey. It's nice